Blood and thrones. The ruthless struggle for power in the Ottoman Empire throughout history. The pursuit of the throne has often been soaked in betrayal, cruelty, and ambition. But perhaps no empire institutionalized this struggle for power as directly or as brutally as the Ottoman Empire. Here, to sit on the throne, one had to survive not only external enemies, but also their own family, especially their brothers. And in many cases, family wasn't just a threat. It was the first enemy, a state built on survival and blood. The Ottoman rose from a small frontier principality in the late 13th century into a vast transcontinental empire. By the 16th century, they controlled the Balkans, Anatolia, the Middle East, and North Africa. This scale of power demanded strict control of the center. The founders' descendants, the House of Osman, ruled unbroken for over 600 years, but that continuity came at a cost. Systematic. The empire wasn't governed by Western-style hereditary. Instead, every male member of the royal family was a potential heir. That meant brothers, cousins, and uncles could all claim the throne. To prevent civil war, sultans embraced an unthinkable solution. They killed their own brothers upon ascending the throne. This wasn't a secret tradition, it was the law. 2. The Fair Tea Law. Legalized fratricide. It was Mehmed II, known as Fatih Sultan Mehmed, the conqueror of Constantinople, who formalized the practice. In his royal code of law, he wrote, "Whichever of my sons ascends to the throne, it is appropriate for him to kill his brothers in order to preserve the order of the world." To modern ears, this sounds horrific. But in the context of 15th century politics, where dynastic civil wars could tear apart entire nations, it was seen as harsh but necessary. The idea was simple. Better to spill the blood of one prince than to risk civil war that could destroy the state. And so began centuries of fratricide, quiet executions, secret orders, and royal sons who never saw adulthood. 3. Selim. From son to usurper to sultan, perhaps no ruler embraced this system more completely than Selim or Yavuz Sultan Selim. Before claiming the throne, he rebelled against his own father, Sultan Bayezid II. He gathered an army, marched on his father's forces, and forced him to abdicate in 1512. Bayezid died mysteriously on the road to exile, and Selim's reign began in blood. But it didn't stop there. Selim ordered the immediate execution of all rival claimants, including his own brothers and nephews. In some accounts, 5 princes were killed on the day of his coronation. Though remembered as a brutal man, Selim expanded the empire more in 8 years than many did in a lifetime, conquering Syria, Egypt, and the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. Still, history wonders. Was it greatness that made Selim ruthless, or ruthlessness that made him great? For Selim the Magnificent, a golden age with a shadow. After Selim came his son, Selim the Magnificent, or Kanuni Sultan. His reign is considered the peak of Ottoman power, art, law, and architecture. But behind the splendor was tragedy. Suleiman's eldest son, Mustafa, was everything. A future sultan should be brilliant, brave, beloved by the army. Yet his stepmother, Hurrem Sultan, had her own sons and ambitions. She feared that if Mustafa became sultan, her children would be executed. Together with the Grand Vizier Rustam Pasha, she convinced Suleiman that Mustafa was plotting rebellion. And during a military campaign in 1553, Suleiman summoned Mustafa into his tent. There, Mustafa was strangled by palace guards. While his father listened silently, the soldiers were devastated. The people were shocked, and Suleiman, despite his laws and victories, was never the same again. V. Ahmed I, and the Golden Cage in 1603, a young sultan named Ahmed I came to power. At only 13 years old, he faced a choice: follow the law and execute his brother, or break centuries of tradition. He chose mercy. Instead of killing his brother, Ahmed placed him in the Kafes. The cage, this section of Topkapi Palace, became the new home for potential heirs. They were kept alive, but in gilded isolation, denied any education, any public role, and often any human interaction. They were princes in name only, forgotten by the world, until one day, the Sultan died, and the cage door opened. Vi madness behind the throne, the cost of isolation. The cage system, while more humane, created a new problem: unfit rulers. Some princes spent decades in solitary confinement before suddenly being thrust into power. Ibrahim, known later as Ibrahim the Mard, spent most of his life in the cage. When his brother Murad IV died, Ibrahim was dragged out, trembling and confused. His reign was marked by erratic behavior, paranoia, and lavish spending. He ordered mass executions based on rumors. He drowned his concubines out of fear of betrayal. Eventually, he was deposed, and the empire began to see the long-term cost of psychological imprisonment. 7. Murad IV. Ordered through terror before Ibrahim came, his brother. Murad IV, one of the most fearsome rulers in Ottoman history. Murad took power during a time of chaos and immediately moved to restore order by any means necessary. He banned alcohol, tobacco, and coffee. He enforced these bans personally, disguised as a commoner, walking the streets of Istanbul at night. Those caught breaking the law were executed on the spot. But Murad's deepest fear was not the people, it was his own family. He executed his brother Bayezid to prevent any future rebellion. Murad restored stability but through fear, violence, and blood. And like many before him, he died young and alone. 8. The hidden hands of power. The Sultanate of Women. While men fought for the throne, women ruled the empire behind the scenes. The Ottoman court was filled with powerful women mothers, wives, and concubines who often decided the fate of Hurrem Sultan, as mentioned, was the first legal wife of a sultan. She broke centuries of custom, and her influence redefined Ottoman politics. Later, Kafes Sultan, perhaps the most powerful woman in Ottoman history. She served as regent for multiple sultans, controlled the court, and even commanded the janissaries at times. Her influence was so vast, she became a target. She was murdered in 1651 by order of her own daughter, Turhan Sultan, in a power struggle that shook the empire. This period became known as the Sultanate of Women, where the real battles weren't always fought with swords but with silence, strategy, and manipulation. A throne of fire. The final reflections. For centuries, the Ottoman throne stood as a symbol of might, but beneath its gold and silk was something much heavier. A legacy of loneliness, sacrifice, and blood. Each sultan wore the crown, but carried the burden of his family's graves. They ruled cities and seas, but rarely trusted even those closest to them. They were conquerors of the world, but often prisoners of their own palaces. What history teaches us is this: power that is born through blood will always bleed again, and in the end, the mightiest throne may be the most fragile of all. If you're fascinated by Ottoman history and royal intrigue, be sure to like the video and subscribe. Comment below to let us know which era or sultan you'd like us to explore next. History is still watching us.